You're in my world now, not your world. And I got friends on the other side.
Our claim is that voodoo dolls can physically harm another person. Popular culture depicts the voodoo doll as a puppet bearing the resemblance of an enemy. The target is cursed with misfortune, pain, and even death via the thrusting of pins into the doll. A voodoo doll is a caricature of a person that can be used to curse the human it represents by inflicting pain on the doll. It fits the definition of paranormal because it covers all of the parameters of pseudoscience. Believers explain this contextually through sympathetic magic. Injuries inflicted on the doll are supposedly simultaneously experienced by the intended person. Believers provide many different explanations behind voodoo dolls, ranging from sophisticated chemistry to a more religious background. But the only reasonable explanation is magic. Many sources say that dark energy and the power of focus or suggestive force can cause these magical happenings. The fallacy here is that magic is not an actual explanation. People say, we can't explain it, but it's true, yet don't look at all of the other possible explanations. Voodoo is a religion that originated in Africa. A source from Huffington Post says, racism clouds our view of voodoo. It is rooted in slavery and intricately connected to the hemisphere's political and social evolution. Voodoo was first practiced in America and the Caribbean by slaves of African descent, whose culture was both feared and ridiculed. Slaves were not considered fully human. Their religion was dismissed as superstition, their priests were denigrated as witch doctors, their gods and spirits were denounced as evil. This claim is not actually testable because there is no evidence to magic, but we can test our alternative hypotheses. There are many personal testimonies, but those do not provide actual evidence for the claim. Voodoo dolls are widely accepted in mainstream society. Major stores like Walmart and Target have them easily accessible to anyone who wants to try their hand at voodoo. These dolls are also sold online on popular websites such as Amazon and Etsy. There are even websites designed specifically for custom-made voodoo dolls. If you don't want to buy one, this WikiHow article explains how to easily create your own voodoo doll with common household objects. With all of these sources claiming to be authentic, we are left wondering what exactly draws people to this alleged magic when it has no real proof to back it up.
I try something with one of you? Sure. Who can I try it with? Want to try with you?
Yeah. What the
You
hell?
believe in the voodoo?
Not really, but kind of sort of. I'm not sure.
Alright. I want you to turn around.
What
Don't
direction?
face me. Face your back to me. Perfect.
Okay.
I need to rub just your skin for a second, right? It's not gonna hurt. It's gonna rub.
Okay.
Tell me if you feel this?
Yes! Yes! Yes, I did. Yes!
I want you to take that pin and you can put it anywhere you like. Face the voodoo doll.
Okay.
Wherever you want, I want you to poke it, okay? Stand forward, you just poke it wherever you want. Go! Where's your poke it?
On the nose?
What?
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Is it real?
Yes. Freaking me out.
If you feel something, I want you to let me know, okay?
Okay. What did you do? Ah! Oh my god!
Try it again. Just wait, no, come here, see this, I want you to see.
God.
Hold on one second. Just one more time. Do it again.
When analyzing details of a paranormal claim, there are some traits to be examined. First is it anachronistic? Most practitioners of voodoo have never seen a voodoo doll as we know it. The voodoo doll probably comes from a combination of the European poppet and African bosio, co-opted throughout the years, primarily by tourist traps and pop culture, to create the dolls as we know them today. Therefore, the claim is rooted in anachronistic ideas. Next is it mystery-focused? When reading about voodoo dolls, it is said only those who deeply understand magic can understand the vast technicalities of voodoo. This ties in to is it myth-focused? Honestly, it can't be said it necessarily pulls from voodoo myths, as the voodoo religion doesn't actually recognize voodoo dolls. However, there are myths surrounding energy in voodoo religion that is used to justify voodoo dolls. Next is grab bag use of evidence. As mentioned, voodoo dolls as we know them today are most likely the combination of two sources, the Western African practice of bosio and the European poppet. The voodoo doll in itself is not necessarily an evil or dark thing, according to many practitioners, but, like many religious and secular symbols, it can be made dark by the person who uses it. There is also tong ren, a kind of voodoo acupuncture where one strikes acupoint marks but on the doll with a hammer to release the energy, as well as distant healing, the idea that a healer doesn't necessarily need to be in the physical presence of a patient to heal them. Next is spurious similarity. Voodoo practitioners reference the law of similarity, which is actually a psychological gestalt principle. This principle holds that parts of a stimulus field that are similar to each other tend to be perceived as belonging together as a unit. So when looking at this diagram of dots, we group together the white ones as a line and the black ones as a line, even though there's really nothing telling us that that is the case. Voodoo doll practitioners say that because they have created the voodoo dolls to be so similar to the person, the universe will group them together in this way. While many voodoo doll books don't really explain the how or why of it, there are some, quote, sophisticated chemistry and physics involved in your average voodoo magic spells, unquote. Modern physics talks about non-locality, or the phenomenon by which measurements made at a microscopic level can sometimes contradict the notions we have in reality. Some magic and voodoo practitioners claim that this is something mystics have known about for ages and that this just confirms their claims of how voodoo dolls work. Next is scenarios of explanations. Stories such as voodoo dolls haunting their town and countless historical accounts of, mostly slaves, using these dolls to harm their masters or spur rebellions are just a few examples of using stories to confirm voodoo doll claims. Next is text exegesis, something that doesn't necessarily exist much in voodoo doll claims. Next is it unfalsifiable? You can't prove a negative, so you cannot prove that voodoo dolls don't work, only that they do, and that evidence is not necessarily in their favor. Lastly does it resist informed critique? This can be difficult to confirm simply by reading sources, but some scanning through message boards and comments show that many practitioners hold tightly to their beliefs in the face of alternative evidence. There are some alternative explanations as to why voodoo dolls can be perceived to work, or even perceived as likely. As with many paranormal claims, coincidence is always a factor. I wish a cold upon my enemy, and they get it, during cold season. Or I use it for healing, but it's a disease that takes a natural course, or a placebo effect has come into play. Ever have random pains throughout the day? Maybe someone's stabbing a voodoo doll of you. Or, think about it, how many random pains, chills, or other sensations does your average person get throughout the day? The American Psychological Association released a study explaining that we like stabbing voodoo dolls because it is a way to release anger and aggression in a controlled way. In one study, people with low blood sugar at the time of the stabbing were often more generous with their pins. You don't even have to be near the person you're angry at. Somewhere deep inside, we all feel like we're actually stabbing the person we're mad at when stabbing a doll that appears like them. This is also sometimes used for therapy for self-harm and release of tension. There is even a psychological phenomenon in which a person could experience sensations that are not occurring on them, but rather with someone or even something else. This is called mirror touch synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition where neural pathways in the brain have not been properly pruned during development, so a person can experience two different senses at once. The more common ones are grapheme color synesthesia, where words and numbers are perceived to have set colors, or seeing colors visually in front of you while music is playing or other sounds are occurring. A person with mirror touch synesthesia experiences things happening to others as their own. So if I had mirror touch synesthesia and I saw someone get touched on the arm, I would feel my own arm being touched, as if I was the one experiencing the contact. While this is perhaps not an explanation for voodoo dolls as a whole, it can offer an explanation of human beings feeling things based on an outside force. A person with this synesthesia may, in theory, experience things they see being done to a voodoo doll. Regardless, it's a way of explaining how a person can feel sensations happening to someone or something other than themselves.
After analyzing voodoo dolls using the proper criteria, we can see that the amount of alternative explanations that exist and the numerous well-established biological principles that govern the human body, that the voodoo doll claim should be met with extreme skepticism. More likely than not, voodoo dolls are just a representation of human superstition and represent the human want for a higher power or force to carry out our wishes. Voodoo dolls capture the imagination of a large number of people and will most likely continue to do so.